Conventional wisdom blames the American drug crisis on Mexican cartels and foreign smugglers. But the actual epidemic began not in the shadows, but in brightly lit doctors' offices, with the stroke of a pen. In the 1990s, Purdue Pharma launched OxyContin. They marketed the drug to the medical community as a revolutionary, non-addictive painkiller, while internally suppressing evidence of its extreme potential for dependency. Purdue Pharma executives precisely targeted the American Rust Belt, flooding clinics in factory towns and military hospitals with prescriptions for blue-collar workers and injured veterans who simply needed relief to return to work. These patients received what was essentially legal heroin. The medical system had been weaponized to distribute a highly potent opioid, creating severe physical dependency in millions of people who were following their doctor's orders. The American drug crisis is the ultimate expression of capitalism monetizing working-class suffering, converting human pain into a recurring revenue stream for pharmaceutical capital. When the government finally restricted legal prescriptions, they created an immediate vacuum. Millions of physically dependent Americans were abruptly cut off from their pharmacy supply, leaving them desperate for a black market replacement. This provided the perfect entry point for the Sinaloa Cartel. They didn't need to build a new market or convince any. Pharmaceutical companies had already spent decades and billions of corporate dollars building this market for them. Mexican cartels function as violent corporate successors, stepping in to service a massive consumer base meticulously prepared by American legal capital. Traditional drug trade relied on agriculture. Crops like coca and poppies require thousands of acres of land, specific climates, and long harvest cycles that are easily disrupted by police raids or weather. Fentanyl bypassed those agricultural limitations. It is fully synthetic, cheaper to produce, and roughly 50 times more lethal than heroin. A laboratory replaces the need for rainfall or sunlight. The supply chain begins in the industrial manufacturing hubs of East Asia. Here, factories legally produce and export precursor chemicals. Precursor chemicals are raw industrial compounds that are synthesized into narcotics later in the process. These raw ingredients are shipped across the Pacific and disappear into a network of underground laboratories in Mexico, where cartels handle the final chemical synthesis. The finished product is then smuggled across the border, creating a death toll of over 100,000 Americans every year. This shift represents an asymmetric biological-chemical war that weaponizes the rules of global free trade against the American interior. Despite these clear supply lines, the U.S. Department of Justice recently placed a $15 million bounty on Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro for narco-terrorism. The geographical focus is statistically baffling. Most fentanyl flows from Mexico, while over 90% of the world's cocaine originates in Colombia and Peru. In the global narcotics matrix, Venezuela is a minor actor. Maduro's real offense is controlling the world's largest proven oil reserves while building strategic alliances with U.S. adversaries. The war on drugs provides the moral cover to execute regime change, the forced overthrow of a foreign government, against geopolitical rivals who threaten American hegemony. If Washington knows exactly where the precursors come from and which cartels are synthesizing them, they could theoretically use military force or total economic embargoes to shut it down. However, Mexican cartels are now extreme capitalists, controlling local infrastructure and government. Eradicating them would likely cause the Mexican state to collapse, sending a tidal wave of refugees toward the U.S. border. The black market generates hundreds of billions of dollars in cash every year, and that liquidity ultimately flows into the balance sheets of top-tier Western financial institutions. Past investigations revealed that banks like HSBC and Wachovia laundered billions in cartel cash. These institutions paid civil fines, but no high-ranking executives served jail time. Regarding China, a total economic decoupling over fentanyl precursors would trigger catastrophic inflation inside the United States, effectively paralyzing the domestic economy. This chart shows the cold, macroeconomic calculation at play. The devastating toll of 100,000 overdose deaths is dwarfed by the stability of a $10 trillion global supply chain. The drug war is an intentional arrangement where the death of the underclass provides liquidity for high finance, and criminal justice serves as a geopolitical weapon.